Welcome to Sermon Brainwave with me, Matt Skinner.
And me, Rolf Jacobson.
And me, Karoline Lewis.
This podcast is for the second Sunday of Easter, which falls on April 27th, 2025. The first reading is Acts 5, 27 through 32, Psalm 150, Revelation 1, 4 through 8, and John 20, 19 through 31. Buckle up for the Easter season.
Buckle up, Buttercup.
Exactly. Some things change because it's major festival time. That means the book of Acts and the Gospel of John. I think John is the only gospel read between now and Pentecost.
Correct.
And Acts replaces
the first
I don't know
reading.
if that's the right word, but
Is the first reading.
Is the first reading.
yeah, there will not be an Old Testament reading as you might traditionally interpret that.
Other than the Psalm.
Other than
Correct.
the Psalm.
Which is good and bad, or it's interesting and disturbing all at once. But
And
that's
then we
another
have
story.
a walk through Revelation.
The happy parts.
The happy parts, the good parts of Revelation. I just have to note, you're looking very Easterish today.
Well, happy
For-
Easter to all of us.
I feel like I didn't dress for the occasion.
Well, for those who don't watch on the Facebook or the YouTube, Matt's wearing a
a very
lavender sport coat.
Easter eggish
Yeah.
outfit.
I am indeed.
I'm still in Lent. I chose black, and I don't know what you are.
I'm what I wear all the time, which is a Sims fishing gear hoodie.
Anyway, we've got quite the
for Pentecost.
sartorial choices today.
Who knows what I'm going to wear? Good use of the word sartorial. I'm
I
sure
love
that will come
sartorial.
back in a couple of weeks when we meet Dorcas and
Yes.
her friend Tabitha. So John 20, I assume we're starting with John.
Yes, let's start with John.
That was me handing off to you.
Well, always, of course, the reading of the second Sunday of Easter, the story of Thomas. It's always. But it's not just the story of Thomas. It is the giving of the Holy Spirit. So these are, in my calculations, the second and third appearances, resurrection appearances of Jesus. And you have the first to the disciples behind the locked doors and the giving of the Holy Spirit, and then second to Thomas a week later.
We're counting Mary
What
in
about
the
Mary?
garden as the first one. correct?
Yes, correct. Mary Magdalene is the first. This is the second and third. We talked about Mary last time.
Matt and I corrected you. The men reminded you that Jesus appeared
Well,
to a
actually,
woman.
Caroline.
Oh, well, actually.
You read
yes.
John 20.
Well, actually.
No, it was you just
Yeah.
misspoke, and so we're making a joke out of it.
Oh, well, I said second and third.
I think this is
Anyway,
going down a really, really dangerous road. And so
Okay,
I
the
want
fourth
you to,
one
I want you
is
to keep talking
21.
now.
fourth one is 21, which we'll get, Anyway, so that's one way you can go, right, is to choose, do you want to focus on one or the other? Do you want to look at both of them together? What difference does that make? The giving of the Spirit will also be sort of kind of revisited, but not really, not in the year of Luke, on Pentecost. So this section of John is the Pentecost reading for the year of Matthew. I think the first thing that I think about, at least I thought about this year, was the significance of the Spirit, the giving of the Spirit, the announcement of the Spirit, as that being the first thing that Jesus announces as the resurrected Jesus. I mean, peace, and then the giving of the Spirit, which is significant in the fact that this has been the promise of the farewell discourse. So if you're the disciples sitting in the room and you hear the word peace, this is not just a generic greeting. This is going to bring back the entirety of all of Jesus' words and promises from the farewell discourse are behind the word peace. And so that could be one direction you could take, is to say, how is peace defined here? What does peace mean here? It really is a connection significantly to the giving of the Spirit, but just all of Jesus' pastoral words that Jesus speaks in the farewell discourse stand behind this. And so what's really interesting about the resurrection appearances in the Gospel of John is how individualized they are. Mary Magdalene, here for the disciples, then Thomas, and then again in chapter 21. And what are those words that Jesus speaks first? And what is it that they are calling to mind? What are they helping the disciples remember? How is it they are fulfillment of Jesus' promises? That is all behind the word peace.
I imagine it's a word Peter appreciates hearing
Peter?
as well. Right, given his denial.
Yes.
Now
will.
seeing
Mhm.
Jesus, whom he has denied, or whose discipleship he has denied,
Yes, right.
and hearing the word peace as opposed to
yes.
being the first word out of Jesus'
Whoa.
mouth.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
like form critically, if the first word's out of the spokesperson for God, Jesus being the living word, if the first thing in an appearance is, woe unto you.
That's bad.
That's bad. Mr. Jacobson, I'd like to see you after class.
Right.
And,
no, but it's peace.
Yeah. So, a funny story. I could tell two different stories about it. One is when my son was pulled out of class first week of senior year, he thought, what did I do? Oh, no. Or maybe, did they find out? I don't know. He's like, what did I do wrong? And then it was like, we need you to play goalie for the soccer team. And because he didn't go out for soccer, but he thought he was in trouble. And then they're like, and more seriously, when I had a surgery in 2007, that they said, hey, there's a chance your husband may die, and this should be about a 4-hour surgery. And after an hour, the doctor came out, and Amy I wasn't there, obviously, but Amy was like, oh, no. And the first thing, good news. The doctor saw that she was afraid and said, good news. And I think that's what Jesus is saying here with peace. Good news. Oh, you don't have to be afraid. And then all of those things come, like you said, come tumbling forth from the whole gospel, kind of like almost leads to this one sentence.
Yeah.
It's a good Sunday to focus on the question of what leads to belief and to acknowledge that not everybody believes in the same way or for the same reasons or follows a preordained path toward belief. There's no arguing people into the resurrection necessarily.
Or what belief trust means. The more I think about this, I was thinking about this quite a bit yesterday actually, is post-enlightenment. Yesterday, a parishioner from many years ago at a congregation I left in 1996, very smart person, wanted to have lunch. And so we ended up having lunch yesterday. And he said, I've been on church for 20 years. I'm a cheerful agnostic. Well, I think part of it is we've turned belief into raw intellectual assent. And then the standard is absolute proof, which is not, I think, what the Bible ever meant. What do you think what does John mean here by belief trust?
Oh, and I would say that that's exactly what John works against, or not purposely, obviously, but that's what John is presenting is a definition of believe, or how John presents that is, and we've talked about this before many, many times, over many, many years, but believing in the Gospel of John is never a noun. It's always a verb. And it is synonymous with being in a relationship with Jesus. And so in that regard, Thomas doesn't need proof. He needs that relationship, an affirmation that that relationship is still intact, just like Mary had and just like the disciples had. He's not asking for, some sort of proof of a certain belief that he has to then confess. He wants what everybody else got. But out of a deep need, I think, when, he was there at the farewell discourse, he listened to all of Jesus' words, and he needs also to know that the relationship that Jesus has promised with his disciples is also for him, and on a very personal and in an intimate way. And I think that's another promise of Easter, isn't it? That the resurrected, or the resurrected Jesus meets us where we are to affirm that relationship, even after, as you said, Peter's situation, but even after all of the events of the Lent and Easter realities. Before Easter was, the Jesus Christ is risen, he is risen indeed, hallelujah. It was an empty tomb. And what do you do with that? What does that mean? And so to go immediately to, oh yeah, Lord, I believe, it doesn't make any sense because of everything that everything that disciples, everything that we should be trying to, integrate, if you will.
One thing that catches my attention this time around is Thomas's statement, I will not believe, and how dangerous it is to put terms on your future belief. Do you know what I mean? This is different from saying, I don't believe right now, or I'm going to need some more, but just like, I'm going to have to do this or see this. Otherwise, I will never believe or will not believe. And of course, he doesn't actually put his hands inside of the wounds, it appears.
Or we don't know.
So he doesn't necessarily
right?
do, but it's just interesting. There's almost a kind of, he says that and I want to go, ooh, be careful. Be careful to set terms on what life might throw at you and what experiences you might have and what that might cause you to put your trust in.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that whole sentence, unless I blah, 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 I will not believe. And I think as a pastor, when if parishioners tell you that, I don't believe, two stories come to mind. especially after some traumatic event, death of a spouse, death of a child. It's very similar, I think, to when some newly divorced people say, I will never get married again. Or my late brother had said, and I only found this out after he died, he'd said to one of my sisters, I don't know if I could ever love again. And so either one of those, your pastor response is not to go, oh, no, you will. It'll be okay, right? I mean, just listen, right? And walk with the people that say, oh, I can't believe in God again. There's this great story of Luther Seminary that I've told many times, which is actually at the time the seminary's John professor, Johannes Rosenthal's, his wife died, and he went to the seminary president, Al Ragnus, and said, I quit because after my wife died, I've lost my faith. I don't believe. And Al said, oh, keep on teaching. We will believe for you until you believe again for yourself. And the seminary community did. And I think that's part of like why we say the creed together. Even the one that says, I believe, we say it together. Pretty much, I don't know anybody really says it alone, although some people actually do say it as part of their nightly devotions. But it's a communal act to believe also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that a lot.
I have to ask you one more thing, though, Karoline, that I don't know the answer to, which is Thomas's statement, my Lord and my God. Mm-hmm. So Jesus says, or the gospel says in John 1, Jesus is the Logos, and the Logos was God and was with God, and nothing was made except through the Logos. So God has spoken this word, and then that Logos is God. Mm-hmm. So how does this confession, my Lord, my God, function as like the climax of the gospel, or a climax?
Yeah, that's a great question, because at the end of the day, the final Christological claim, if you will, for John is not that Jesus is the Messiah, but that Jesus is both Lord and God. Jesus is the Lord as the incarnated Logos, but then God because Jesus is the incarnated Logos. And so a really careful reading of John, much to the way in which it's typically read, of Jesus being this sort of fully divine being who doesn't seem to have any human traits. That's really not true. That the entirety of John is holding together this promise of the Word made flesh. And so that's really what this is. And what's, I think, so powerful about this is that this Christological claim here of Thomas is that it doesn't explain it, or it's not a third person. Again, like Mary, it's not a third-person claim, this is the Lord and this is God, but it's my Lord and my God, just as Mary said, I have seen the Lord, and the disciples have said, we have seen the Lord. And so it becomes this embodied testimony of this relationship that you have with Jesus. So and so that could be a whole nother, I'm glad you asked that, because that could be a whole nother direction of what does it mean to see the resurrected Jesus? It's to make a first-person testimony of having seen him, but not really having all the answers of having all that figured out. It's just being affirmed of that relationship once again.
That's awesome.
Many other things we could say.
No, that really helps me.
Many other things, but Jesus did many other signs.
we have many other podcasts.
And we have many other podcasts, so we will move on.
All right, so Matt, the book of Acts. So we're dropping down in the middle. I know, you've helped me so much with Acts over the years. So we're dropping down in the middle of the story, when they had brought them. All right. Okay. Who's the they and them?
Yeah, this is an important place to start.
It's about pronouns.
Pronouns, always a good place to start.
The objects here are the apostles. We're not sure exactly how many or anything like that, but we know that Peter's one of them.
All right.
And the they who are doing this are the Sadducean priestly elites in Jerusalem. We know this because it says so in 517, when it's the high priest and all who are with him, that is the sect of the Sadducees. So this is really important that you recognize, that anybody recognize, this is a particular narrow slice of the Jewish leadership in Jerusalem who causes trouble for the apostles in chapters mostly 3, 4, 5. It's not right to refer to this as the Sanhedrin, as if there's some kind of a official council. This is the high priest and his closest advisors, whom he could convene at any time as kind of an ad hoc.
It's not the student
committee.
council.
It is not. Darn. Now, we're going to learn that there is a Pharisee there named Gamaliel, but that makes sense that if you're the high priest and you're trying to control what's going on in the temple that you are in charge of, and you want to gather a couple people around you and say, what are we going to do with these people? You would get various kinds of folks. So this is also not the only thing that Acts has to say about who's responsible for the death of Jesus. Ideally, it would be great if somebody had also read chapters 4 and even going into chapter 6. There are other places that talk about that. So this is really parachuting into a very specific group in a very specific moment in the midst of a bigger conflict that's been going on. Not to say you shouldn't preach on it. It's just like you said, who are the they, who are the them? Not to say that you shouldn't preach on it. Sorry, double negative. My bad if I
love double
messed that up.
negatives.
Anyway, so there's that. These are very powerful people. These are the same people who were able to engineer the death of Jesus by bringing him to Pilate and saying lies about him. So
there's one thing I would like the three of us to talk about, and then I have a big question about Acts for you, Matt. But I do want to point out that, so the commentary on the website, just a reminder, a new listener asked us recently about the commentary. So that reminder, every week we have commentaries on our website, Working Preacher. There's a commentary on each of the readings, and then there's commentaries from 17 years of doing this. So there's more than one. If you don't like that commentary, you can read another one. Find it.
Which you can look up. It's listed on the website, and you can look it up in the Bible Index. Anyway.
See, I really like this commentator's first name, Raj. They would make great initials for somebody.
Those are your initials, are they not?
Thank you.
Oh.
See?
Raj Nadella, fine New
R.A.J.
Testament scholar.
Got it.
All right.
Columbia Seminary. But
Yes.
So, okay, I think a lot of people are going to hear the question of civil disobedience from God's people to the secular worldly law. We must obey God rather than any human authority. That's an issue right now for a lot of people globally, a lot of people in our own society. And one of our grads recently had lunch with a couple months ago, and he said one of the things he most deeply regrets is a previous instance where he thought he should have engaged in civil disobedience. And if something comes up in whatever issue he was raising soon, he said, I'm not going to miss it. I'm going to go to jail. So civil disobedience, your thoughts? How's that?
well, we could say this is not the first time you hear of it in the Bible.
Correct.
Daniel would be an example of somebody who's saying,
Shadrach,
I'm going to
Meshach,
do this.
Abednego.
So you've got that. You've also got plenty of Greek philosophers who predate the New Testament by a long time who have very similar lines to this. So the idea of, do you disobey an unjust law for the sake of a commitment to a higher morality or power is as old as probably civilization itself, is my guess. But here, it's not... Well, I'm all for civil disobedience if it's, you have to treat yourself, but civil disobedience or religious freedom is a better word to talk about. Religious freedom is not, my religion says I don't have to do this, therefore I'm not going to do it, and I don't expect there to be any consequences. Civil disobedience is, I'm going to stand against this law and accept whatever consequences come my way as a testimony to my, whether it's virtue or God or faith or whatever. In a lot of American discourse, it's been mixed up. It's been, because of my faith, I shouldn't be responsible to sell these pharmaceuticals to these people or to be a part of, do this kind of work in my organization. It has to be a willingness to take whatever the consequences might be, which is not easy. And I think it's what makes civil disobedience powerful, is to see people suffer consequences, right? I mean, we can talk about history of social change and see examples of this where people suddenly realize, I can't believe this is happening in the name of my government or religion or whatever. Probably longer answer than you want.
Deep.
Caroline's probably got a better one.
No, I like it.
You like Matt's
I
answer?
like civil disobedience and Matt's answer, but I think that's really helpful. Yeah.
Well, I don't like it when it inconveniences me or I disagree with it. I just trying to when someone, if
There is that.
Yeah.
there's certain things that people are doing, like in the past few years, like shutting down freeways. Then there's an ambulance on the way to the hospital and somebody in that ambulance dies because of their civil disobedience. I don't like that kind. Unless the thing that they are protesting against is so urgent that we have to do it by this Sunday. Because I don't think civil disobedience, I mean, it opens up a whole can of worms. I don't like that kind. I do. My old Bishop Lowell Erdahl would never pay his phone tax because it was used for nuclear weapons, and he would always go protest things, but didn't shut down freeways. Anyway.
I think one of the things that this passage raises, in a general way in terms of preaching and what difference does Jesus' resurrection make? What difference does narrating the God of our ancestors raised up Jesus, whom you have killed, by hanging him on a tree, God exalted him at his right hand and as leader and savior, that he might give repentance to Israel and forgiveness of sins. And we are witnesses to these things. So that, I think for me, that's the real question here, or not the real question, but a significant question here, right? Is to say, to what will you be a witness?
Right. And what are the things that you've witnessed
Yeah.
that you simply can't
You cannot
deny
not,
or stop speaking about?
yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of another double negative, but you cannot not
Yeah.
engage in
Yeah.
civil obedience because you have witness, and you cannot not then do that. So I think that's the other thing that's really at stake here. But in a wider question of asking the second Sunday after Easter, what difference does what we just went through in the last, Lent and Holy Week and Easter, what difference does it make? What have you seen? What will you give witness to? Or is it just another Easter 2025 and I keep going on with my life? So I think that's a significant. I think
you're absolutely right. And it's
question.
worthwhile with respect to this passage to note that they're not asking to take over the temple. They're not shutting the temple down.
Yeah.
They're saying we have to bear witness to what we've seen. And even what the authorities say, you're determined to bring this man's blood upon us, isn't quite true. They've been blaming a lot of people for the crucifixion of Jesus. And that's a bigger question, but they don't quite understand. Now, the apostles could choose to bear witness to Jesus somewhere besides the temple complex, but they seem committed to doing that as well.
I do want people to realize when I said, I was joking somewhat, like when I said, I like it as long as it doesn't inconvenience me, right? Or,
Yes.
Well, it gets to the questions of, if you're going to be civilly disobedient, what are your tactics? I mean, that's a political calculation people have to make. In this case, it is interesting that they could go somewhere else in Jerusalem and preach if they wanted to.
Yeah, right.
Lots of other places.
They're not interested in doing that.
Yeah, lots of other places.
And I'm sure some people who wanted to get into the temple were inconvenienced. I can't get through Solomon's portico because there's all these people there.
In our culture, it's not a good idea to go praise Jesus like in the court of some other religion. That would be rude.
Correct. Oh, that's not exactly what they're doing.
I know.
I'm
just trying to say.
Be really careful about
location.
how
you thinking about it?
And how your conscience is operating and how much, Don't do it alone. How about that? Make sure you've got people around you who can say, good idea, bad idea.
So because this is Easter, we're focusing on these texts. One quick question, Matt. Give us your best 30 seconds as we are witnesses to these things. The concept of witness in Luke Acts. 30 seconds, go.
It's really important. Acts 1:8, you will be my witnesses. This is the commission.
Judea, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria. I always get it to the ends of the earth. I always get to the ends of the earth, but
keep going. You can have the rest of the 30 seconds. You're on a roll.
No, I can never remember which is first, Judea, Jerusalem, Samaria. I know
Jerusalem, all Judea, and Samaria,
okay,
and to the ends of the earth.
Right. I've got to remember that.
That's the job description,
I just took up 15
so to speak.
seconds.
That's all right. I don't think I have much more to say, except it's a pretty simple job description. It's not even make converts, for example.
What's a witness?
It's somebody who speaks about what they have experienced or seen or known to be true. I could tell you a longer story, but it would take more than 30 seconds. But this is what you're called to do when you're asked to be a witness. What did you see? That's usually one of the first questions, right? What happened? And if you can't answer all the questions, that's all right. It's not your job. It's just your job to say what you experienced, what you saw. Mm-hmm. You don't have to prove it. That's for the lawyers to do.
So a quick word on Psalm 150.
It's an awesome psalm.
Which is simply one element of a praise psalm is the call to praise. Hey, come and praise me, and then usually get some interesting things. Here it's just that. It's simply the call to praise. Which is elongated and turned into one psalm and put as the exclamation point of the Psalter. Very hard to preach on.
It's fitting for the second Sunday of Easter. And
liturgically.
You just do the psalm.
I would make this into a great call to worship.
Oh, yeah.
I'd say, praise the Lord. And then everybody yells back, where? And it's like in the sanctuary. And like, why? Well, for his mighty deeds. How? With the trumpet. What else?
Lute and harp.
You can yell back at the. You
could have a tambourine, too.
At the pulpit.
That's actually a great sermon.
Yeah.
All right. Revelation 1. We're going to be in Revelation for a while. One of you guys, give us a kickoff.
Well, like we said earlier, it's Revelation, the good parts. But I think you and I were having a conversation, just to set this up for the next few weeks, you and I were having a conversation about, you had taught on Revelation a couple of weeks ago at your church, and just how different Revelation is sounding, or it's sounding very interesting in this time and place in terms of, and the commentary points this out, I mean, the way in which paying attention to the dangers of imperial power and calling out the true nature of empire. And yet in the midst of that, you have the revelation, right? The revelation, that's what apocalypse means, the revelation of Jesus. And here, I think significantly, the commentary points this out, even those who pierced him. I mean, you see the pierced, the pierced suffering Jesus. And what difference does it make to have Jesus be revealed in that way?
Yeah. Well, and we'll see that again next week, where it happens before the text, where it happens before the text, but Jesus is introduced as a lamb standing as if it had been slaughtered, which is a very bizarre description. Can you imagine what that looks like? But he's as triumphant as he will look at the end of the book of Revelation. For most of it, you do get a sense of the vulnerability that's forever inscribed on him. Sermon Brainwave is a production of Luther Seminary's Working Preacher. Working Preacher has been a trusted source of inspiration, interpretation, and imagination for preachers worldwide since 2007. Find episodes and links at workingpreacher.org/brainwave. And be sure to rate, subscribe, and comment on YouTube. Thanks for joining us.